Hello and welcome to the Falling Knife Project, where we're trying to turn $25,000 into $750K. We're back. I know it's been a long time since the last update. I've seen all of your posts. I've seen all of your comments. I know I've communicated with some of you through email. I wanted to give the rest of you an update as far as how things were going. I told you I'd always be honest with you, and so that's what we're going to be. Before I get started, this is not financial advice. I am not a financial advisor and obviously take a huge amount of risk. So let's talk about the bad, the good, and the path forward if there is one. So the bad. So I mentioned at the outset of this project that these trades were all long volatility trades, which means that I wanted the market to move. Okay, so these trades would do better when there was market volatility. And starting in mid-October of 2025, after about a month after the launch of this ensemble, the market pretty much stayed pinned within a very tight range. That is not favorable and was not a favorable regime for this ensemble. In fact, here's a few headlines about the market staying within a tight range. There's one here mentioning tightest range in 50 years. There's another one I found talking about the tightest range since 1955 or 1960 or something like that. Again, obviously not favorable towards what I am and was trying to do. So that was one negative. The next negative or thing that I was really surprised about were the correlations. So I back tested this ensemble for each strategy back to 2016. So I had 10 years worth of data that suggested that the correlations were 0.3 or less for all of these trades between each other. And people did warn me. They said, listen, your correlations are going to go to 1 at some point. And I believed them. But what surprised me was how long they moved much, much closer to 1. Okay, the duration of how long they stayed there was very surprising and kind of caught me off guard. And again, I think it was a byproduct of this regime where we were staying pinned for so long. And we'll see if we unpin now that we have this Iran war and the markets fluctuated a bit, and now it's actually gone up and we've broken range. So we'll see if that reintroduces a little bit more volatility that's more favorable towards trend trades, because pretty much any trade you ran since the middle of October, if it was trend trade based, if it was whether it was a 0 day to expiration, a 1, 7, 14, 30 days to expiration, those were all huge stinkers. Okay, there wasn't not a whole lot of setups that were going to work no matter what you did on the long volatility side. The last thing to mention on the downside was the oscillator trade. I mentioned out of the gate that was the trade that I had the least amount of conviction in, and that turned out to be true, unfortunately. That trade's returns fell 3 standard deviations outside of the expected range. And so I sized that way down. I'm running that at about 1/5 of the original size that I was running it at out of the gate, which is a whole nother problem. Okay, so that trade was sized way too large. And if you recall, one of the key important things as to why this project was going to work that I mentioned is that I wanted to have and was going to have tons of occurrences that were going to allow small edges to play out in my favor. And with this trade, I fell into a mental trap where the max loss per trade was between, probably $5,000 to $7,000, whereas the rest of the trades were between $500 and $1,000. But I justified sizing the oscillator where I did out of the gate by saying, well, it's a longer duration trade, meaning the days to expiration on that trade were a longer duration. And so if I apportion a percentage of that loss to the number of days that I was in the trade, then really my max loss per day on that trade is really only $500 to $1,000, which falls under the same methodology as the rest of the trades. Wrong. Okay, so that bears no semblance of the same concept that I'm going for, in that you're still only getting one occurrence on that trade. Okay, I was wrong. And so size that down. Let's talk about the good. Okay, so the good news is that I'm happy with the way that I have traded the ensemble through this tough regime. So I continued to make tweaks. I already mentioned the oscillator, but I did make additional tweaks as far as some of the structures of the trades. I changed them to some of the trades from like debit spreads to broken wing butterflies, and just adjusted some of the wing widths and made small tweaks. And so if we look at the original ensemble's back test, again, these are not live trading results, but this is the original ensemble's back test. You can see it went right up, and then it drew way down, and I'd currently be at negative $7,100. Where I am currently with live trading as of today is I am up $9,134, which is nowhere near where I was forecasting to be. So I'm not real happy with the results, but again, I am happy with how I've traded through this market. Path forward, let's talk about path forward. So I am going to keep trading. One thing I'm going to do is add a couple of tighter winged iron flies to the ensemble. And the reason I'm doing this, and this is short volatility, okay? Everything else has been long volatility up to this point, but I'm going to add some short volatility in the form of some tight winged iron flies to the ensemble. And the reason I'm doing this is I mentioned the correlations moving towards 1 earlier. There's a difference between uncorrelated trades and negatively correlated trades. And by adding these short flies, I'm going to add trades that truly have negative correlation to the ensemble. And so if this regime continues where trend is just getting crushed, these flies should help balance out some of the losses. Now, the downside of doing this is I'm actually adding more leverage to the portfolio by doing this. So, ideally would have started with more, a larger amount in the portfolio, net lick out of the gate. I think where I'm at currently is very tight. I'm at 34,000 of balance. So yeah, again, adding leverage there. The other risk is sequence risk. We've talked about this in the past. I'm making a significant change to the ensemble, so there's a good likelihood that starting tomorrow the regime will flip back and that trend will be more favorable, and that we'll look back in a month and say, man, if I didn't add those flies, I'd be on target, but I did. So there's a chance that I hit a cluster of losses right out of the gate on the flies that draws me down 15K or something like that. And that's part of the risk that you have to take when you're making a significant change like that. And so here is what the ensemble would look like. This is the back test, again, from the start of the project, had I had these flies in since inception. Okay, so you can see this compared to the original ensemble. Certainly looks more favorable. Again, tested this back to 2016. It's still positive every year since 2016. So thank you everybody for tuning in. Thank you for following along. I'll try to keep you guys more updated. I hope everybody is having a lovely spring.